வணக்கம் நேயர்களே, மற்றும் ஒரு ஞாயிறு இரவு பொழுதில் ஸ்பாட்லைட் நிகழ்ச்சியில் இன்றைய நாளிலும் உங்களை சந்திப்பதில் மகிழ்ச்சி. ஒவ்வொரு ஞாயிற்றுக்கிழமையும் ஒவ்வொரு பிரதிநிதிகளை ஸ்பாட்லைட் நிகழ்ச்சி களம் கண்டு வருகிறது. இன்றும் ஒரு முக்கியமான பிரதிநிதி கலந்து கொள்ள காத்திருக்கின்றார். ஐக்கிய நாடுகள் சபையினுடைய இலங்கைக்கான வதிவிட பிரதிநிதி மார்க்-ஆண்ட்ரூ அவர்கள் இன்றைய ஸ்பாட்லைட் நிகழ்ச்சியிலே கலந்து சிறப்பிக்க இருக்கிறார். ஆங்கில மொழி மூலமான நேர்காணல் இன்றைய ஸ்பாட்லைட் நிகழ்ச்சியில் தமிழ் உப தலைப்புகளோடு உங்களிடம் வர இருக்கின்றது. அரசியல் ஆய்வாளர் திரு ஜதீந்திரா அவர்கள் நேர்காணல் செய்கிறார். இப்போது அந்த ஸ்பாட்லைட் நிகழ்ச்சியை உங்களுக்காக நாங்கள் தருகிறோம்.
Thank you so much to talk to us in your trip to Northern Province. So I would like to start first. What about your trip to Northern Province?
So we're very happy. I'm very happy to be back in Jaffna, but this time I brought with me the entire United Nations country team. This is the first time that we come to the Northern Province since 2017 as a team together. We of course come often in different ways, but this is the first time we come as a team, and we came to meet with government, civil society. We visited some of our projects. We met with the governor. And at the same time, we're here for our first event to celebrate the 80 years of the founding of the United Nations, but the 70 years of Sri Lanka being a member of the United Nations. So it's really a great way for us to start this year of celebration of this anniversary, and Jaffna is the first place that we celebrated this anniversary.
If I am correct, I think this is the first time you are going to given an interview to the Tamil media.
Absolutely, and I'm very happy to be doing so.
Okay, so you have over 20 years of experience in the conflict prevention and the international development in different parts of the world. So, if I am correct, you joined in 2023. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, how do you feel the Sri Lankan experience compared with? I think you have experience with the tough situations. You know, work in even in Libya.
Yes, and others. But I think what's interesting of now having worked in many countries over the course of my career is that there's no formula, there's no recipe, there's no magic bullet. Every country defines its own approach to development, its own approach to peace building. And so every country needs to decide and needs to define its own way forward. What I find quite encouraging here in Sri Lanka is that despite the difficulties, despite the trauma of past conflict, despite many tensions that may arise, Sri Lankans believe very much in institutions, and the last elections was a good testimony of that. But also there's a recognition now that by everybody I speak to, that we need to move forward, that 15 years now after the war, it's time to move forward. And so, of course, there's a big debate of how that happens, but there's an agreement that we need to move forward. And what I find fantastic everywhere I go in Sri Lanka, especially compared to many other places I've worked, is the openness of people. There's nowhere is there taboo subjects. People are extremely open and welcoming. And so I think that makes a huge difference.
You know, the thing is, the Sri Lanka is a vivid example how a country mislead the international obligations, witnessing broken promises. Since 2012, you know, the UN Human Rights Council has tabled a number of resolutions to promote accountability in Sri Lanka. But from the Tamil perspective, but nothing done meaningfully. So in that sense, there is a view among the Tamil polity and even including the civil society, the UN efforts to ensure the accountability in Sri Lanka is a failed case. Do you believe? How do you respond?
No, I don't think it is at all a failure. I mean, I think we first need to make a difference, because between the Human Rights Council, which approves resolutions, and the UN entities, including the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The Human Rights Council is a member state organization where negotiations happen when they agree, while the UN entities are entities that are there to support a process. Yeah, and so both are very different, and I wouldn't say that the United Nations and its entities have failed, because in many ways we are there to support national efforts. And so with resolution or without resolution, ultimately, it's the responsibility of a country to move forward with the rule of law, with justice, with accountability. There's no country in the world that has built peace, that has moved forward with accountability because of the Human Rights Council or because of the UN. These entities can be facilitators, they can be supporters, but at the end of the day, it depends on the country. And although I agree in many ways with you that, of course, I think the Tamil people, but I think most Sri Lankans would have wanted much more progress on these issues of rule of law, of justice, of accountability in the country. There are many things that have gone forward. Yeah, Sri Lanka is signatory to many agreements, many human rights agreements on education, on rights of women, that Sri Lanka is actually doing pretty well compared to many other countries. Or on building institutions of human rights. Sri Lanka just got increase of its certification for the quality of the work of its Human Rights Commission. Yes, so there are progress. Yeah, of course, it's been very slow. We wish that things would move a lot faster, but we are also conscious that in every country, these things take time. And the challenge I feel is that we need to be looking at a gradual approach, in the sense that we need to move forward, and there needs to be steps that build trust over time. And I think that's what we haven't seen lately. Yeah, and I think we are encouraged by the new government's pronouncements, signaling of its desire to move forward and to make steps to build trust. And I think that's the most important, on land issues, on representation in the police, on demilitarization. These are all issues on rule of law and fighting corruption, on investing in jobs and equal opportunities. And so I feel there is a path forward, but we need to give the first step. The short term and the long term start the same day. Yeah. And sorry, and of course, I just want to say that if the authorities are decided and have the will to move forward, of course, the United Nations, the entities of the United Nations, I don't know about the Council, but the entities of the United Nations are clearly here to accompany and support in this process. Yeah.
You mentioned about the new government. So, you know, the current government, the National People's Power government, it seems many believe is an agent for system change, but they also keen to reject the international investigation mechanisms, or the extent of power of the external evidence collections. They are keen on that. So in that sense, you know, the significant thing is, one side is the successful governments and the singular polity, they are keen to oppose the international investigation mechanism in any form. But other side, the victims who are Tamils, they urge for they oppose internal investigation mechanisms in any form, and urge for the international investigation setup. So in that sense, as a responsible party, how UN is going to balance it between the government of Sri Lanka and the victims. Do you believe is it possible to balance?
Well, again, I think the decision on the actual resolution is part of a negotiation between states. This is not for me to have, let's say, an opinion on what should be contained in that resolution. But what I can say is that what is the most important today is, again, to build trust, and to build trust concretely, and to demonstrate that the national institutions, that the country is ready to move forward. And I do think that there is a lot of space for the relationship between Sri Lanka and the Human Rights Council to change to a more supportive or collaborative relationship. And I certainly hope that member states have a more collaborative approach to issues of justice and accountability. And certainly the UN is there for that, is there to accompany that. Yeah.
The other thing is, let's move to the governing issues. You mentioned in your speech, you have a vision path forward to modernized and reforming public administration, including the provincial levels. But if we look at the situations, the successful governments of Sri Lanka have refused to holding the provincial council elections. So how we appreciate your vision and efforts to achieve this task, but how it is possible and to effectively implement your vision. Then what is your perspective on the effective provincial council, and how do you see that the successful governments deny that?
So I first think that we have a constitution. Sri Lanka has a constitution. It's approved by Sri Lankans. It's in effect. And the constitution says that there should be local elections and that there should be provincial elections. And I understand, of course, that the new government wants to change and reform this constitution, and we certainly welcome and support that. But in the meantime, there is a constitution, and I think it should be respected. Because if you don't respect the constitution, everything else is optional. Yes? Every other law is optional. You can choose. So that's not how our country functions. So I'm very encouraged by the decided will of the government to go forward with the local elections in April, I understand. I think on Friday they will receive the comments from the Supreme Court, and I hope a bit later the provincial council elections. And we think it's very important for these elections to happen. Not only important for the North or the East, but for every province, because regardless of how many competencies or devolved subjects the provinces and the local governments have, this will be a huge help to have additional advocates for development in all the provinces and at the local level. There are so many issues at the local and provincial level that at the moment are dealt with by MPs at the central level or ministries. This needs local and provincial elections. So although it's not perfect, and you and I could discuss many changes that are needed, and I would also say that not only in the North and the East, but across the country, people want local governments, people want provincials, authorities to also be able to bring development at the local level. So I think that's very important. We are very supportive of that. And certainly we think that on top of that, we need a reform, obviously, in the structure of the state. That includes the digitalization efforts and others. We've just launched last week a new effort with the Registrar General to digitalize all the civil registry, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage. So we're very happy to have partnered with the government to launch this. But this is just an example of the kind of modernization effort that needs to be accompanied by a reform of the civil service structure. But absolutely, we need those elections at the provincial and local level. And I'm very happy to see the government taking this seriously.
So why we ask this question? Because, you know, the government officials cannot represent the people who are inhabited in the north and east. That's why I'm asking these questions.
Absolutely. So it's very important. And I think, you know, countries that have succeeded in, you know, poverty has doubled in Sri Lanka in 5 years. Doubled. I don't remember another country where poverty has doubled in 5 years. And so we need a state structure that is able to deliver at the local level. You know how much was the percentage of execution last year on the investment budget of the northern province? Not on recurrent costs, on investments, 8%. 8%. So that means that the budget, only 8% was managed to be spent in the northern province. So that's not a problem of money. It's a problem of capacity of the state structures to deliver, to procure, to do the contracts, to spend. So, you know, we talk a lot about raising funds and projects and new money, but the part of the challenge is the capacity of the state to execute, to have an impact in development.
And the other thing is, you know, it is related with the first questions. And in your, you mentioned empowering youth economically and politically, particularly young women.
Yeah.
Can you share? I mean, you visited to North. Can you share about your operational strategy in terms of how we are going to support to economically and politically empowering programs?
I just came from Jaffna University just now, and we met with maybe 50 people that are in second and third year of the university across all faculties. And I find it extraordinary to find, as always, you know, these very dynamic young people. But to give you an example, I met one of them who's studying in artificial intelligence. Yes, he's going to have a degree in artificial intelligence. Where is he going to work? Where is he going to find a job? There's not one software company where he can be hired here in Jaffna. I'm not even sure there is some in Colombo. Yes? So I think that's an example of how this has to change. And it has to change very quickly in different ways. On the one hand, I think we need to invest a lot more on education and professional training of young people. As society, as the country gets older, the young people that remain need to be a lot more productive for economic growth to be sustained. If not, we're going to have a reduction of growth. So we need to invest in these young people's education, professional training. But equally important, we need to move away from a dependency of employment related to the state. You know, traditionally in the North, it was really the state sector that gave jobs. There's one cement factory here, there was a chemical plant, it closed, you know. So the government now wants to open 3 industrial zones in the North. This is very welcome. But that means that the private sector, yes, we need investment in this region. We need the diaspora to not only invest in temples and in their private houses. The diaspora needs to come here and invest in businesses, in small and medium businesses that are employing hundreds and hundreds of young people. Because if we don't have jobs for these people, the region, yes, the region will be just, you know, the region is not going to grow. And it's going to be a region where every time we train and pass people through university, and they're going to end up in Toronto, or in Australia and somewhere else. This is not a development strategy. A development strategy is not, we train people and we send them to Canada, and this is to the benefit of Canada. We need jobs here, and to have jobs, it's not only creating jobs, but it's supporting people that create jobs, entrepreneurs that are able to have support and accompaniment, but also credit. Banks are not loaning anything to young entrepreneurs. So there are ideas. I listen to them every day. There are ideas. There are entrepreneurs. There are businesses, but they need support, and they especially need the state to stop putting obstacles for business registration, access to credit, etc., etc. So I think that's very important. And I would just say a last aspect. Agriculture is one of the motors of development of this region. Yes. And there's a lot of potential for agricultural products, for agricultural transformation. This is not going to happen if it's the military who's occupying the land. Yes. It's not going to happen if the land is mostly occupied by the forestry department, the wildlife department. That land needs to be degazetted and returned to private owners so that the land can be used in a productive way. And so these are motors for growth for this region. These are the things that can make this region successful. And so this is where we need, of course, the government, but also the private sector, and we need civil society to push forward in together.
And the political empowerment?
Well, absolutely. And I think this is the base of everything. You know, in many ways, I saw it now at Jaffna University. Many of the young people there, they feel they're excluded, yes, from political parties. They see the political parties as being led by old men. Yeah, there's no women in politics. And so if we don't give a space to young people to engage in civil society, if we don't give space to young people to engage in business, in politics, I think we are not going to go anywhere.
Finally, and what message would like to convey to the victims who are still seeking justice? Since the war has the 15 years has been passed since the end of the war. So, what message you would like to convey?
Well, I think on the most fundamental message is that, here in Sri Lanka, but everywhere around the world, you see today so many conflicts raging around the world. We've had last year an increase of 25% of violence globally compared to the previous year. That's huge. And so I think every person has the right to justice. Every person has the right to non-recurrence. Every person has the right to truth. Yes. And so I think that's the most fundamental message. The other is that we are here to amplify the voices of those victims. We are here, and globally, this is the United Nations, is here to amplify those voices, to make sure that those voices are heard. But it's also important to recognize how difficult the path towards justice is. And I don't need to tell this to you or to anybody in this province. The path to truth, to justice, to reconciliation is a long one. It's difficult. There's steps backwards. And so for me, I think we need to be persistent. We need to continue fighting for these values, for these rights, because they are fundamental rights for every human being. And so you can count on the United Nations to continue accompanying, supporting, facilitating for those rights to be one day achieved.
So if you want to say, how to as advice to the Tamil, even Tamil diaspora, already you mentioned about the diaspora, how they should react on these situations. So if you want to, you can share how they should work proactively, and also the civil society in the North and East.
Yeah, I would never give advice because, I'm not in the shoes of the Tamil people here. I'm not in the shoes of the diaspora. But I do think that diasporas everywhere around the world, yeah, in many other countries. It's easy to have opinions when you don't have to live the consequences, yes, of your opinions. And so I think it's very important for the diaspora to be humble, but also to trust the people who are living here, and to work through institutions, to work at investing in leaders that are here, in institutions that are here, and in businesses that are here to contribute meaningfully. But I think that's the experience everywhere around the world, not necessarily advice. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Marc-André.
Thank you very much. Talk to us.
Thank you.
Sharing your thoughts. Thank you.